Hi, everybody. My name is Aline Lerner. I'll tell you a little bit more about who I am and why I care about job search stuff in a moment. But before I even do that, I think I have like 10 minutes. There's no way to give a useful talk about interviewing that's 10 minutes long that actually talks about technical stuff. I don't think it's possible. I wanted to make these the most action-packed, signal-packed 10 minutes you'll have. So I tried to get very tactical, not about, technical things, but more about what to say, what situations to avoid, and hopefully if there's one thing you take away from this talk is that you can postpone your interviews at any time and you're not at the mercy of recruiter schedules. So that's a preview, but let me tell you a little bit about who I am. I was an engineer. Never worked in Python. My weapon of choice was and still is JavaScript. I hope that won't get me laughed out of the room, but I have used Python for all sorts of dirty data things that I've done. Um, I worked as head of talent at a few companies, including Udacity. Most recently, well, recently is kind of relative, but for the last 10 years, I've been the founder of an interview prep company called Interviewing.io. And I've also co-written the official sequel to Cracking the Coding Interview, creatively called Beyond Cracking the Coding Interview. I personally helped thousands of engineers get better at interviewing and negotiation. So I'm going to just tell you a bunch of stuff I've seen people do wrong, and hopefully you can avoid it in your own job searches. Okay, so these are the three biggest mistakes people have made in my career that I've seen. One is not preparing for interviews. I don't think I need to harp on that, but I didn't feel right not including it. Here's one that's a little more subtle. Not controlling the timing of your job search and not postponing when you're not ready. Um, Kind of a common situation is maybe you'll hear from a recruiter. They finally reach out to you. Maybe it's a company you're interested. You get on a call with them and they say, great, let's have you interview in a few weeks. And because you weren't in control of when they reached out to you, chances are you're not ready. And chances are, even if you're ready for technical phone screens, you may not be ready for on-sites, which tend to lean more toward system design and behavioral interviews. What many people don't know is that you can actually say, hey, I'm not ready. Can we do the interview in a few months? Uh, it's, I'll tell you exactly what to say, but generally recruiters will try to exert some pressure and they'll say, well, we're talking to other candidates, this and that, we really want you in. If you're talking to really small companies like startups, maybe they have just one open headcount, in which case, yeah, you should probably interview now or you may lose your opportunity. But in the overwhelming majority of cases where you're talking to large companies, they have infinite evergreen headcount, especially now that hiring is recovering. I think the only time this wasn't true was maybe in 2022, but now it is. So you can even ask, how much headcount do you have for this position? How many candidates are interviewing if you're not comfortable? But if it's a large company, unless you're really married to this one particular team and it's a company that recruits for specific teams, you lose nothing by asking to postpone. The reality is if you interview and you're not ready and you fail, you're going to be frozen out for a few months. So I'll actually tell you what to say to postpone your interviews. You can just say, I'm really excited about interviewing at this company. Unfortunately, if I'm honest, I haven't had a chance to practice. I want to put my best foot forward. I've tested this copy. It works. Please steal it. Please use it. I'll share my slides with Eugene. Hopefully he can share them with you all. So the other thing that's important, and I kind of alluded to this, is preparation for phone screens is generally different than preparation for on-sites. So let's say that you do your phone screen and then the company wants to on-site you. And in the meantime, you started talking to a few other companies, but you're not ready for your on-site or you're far behind in process with other companies and you want to do everything at the same time. You can just use this again and say, hey, I want to take some time to study system design or domain specific topics or whatever is going to be covered during the on-site, and you can completely control the timing of your job search. The other mistake that I've seen people make is telling recruiters stuff about your compensation or your job search. This is more about negotiation, but so much of negotiation is not about saying the right thing at the end. It's about controlling the flow of information. Why shouldn't you tell recruiters stuff? Because the honest answer, and I've been a recruiter, I've run recruiting at a few companies, and I've also ran an agency. The fact is, recruiters, anything you tell them, they will just use against you. So let's say they ask you where you're interviewing. And you say, well, I have an upcoming on-site with Meta and I have a phone screen with Google. What's going to happen? And you may not want to interview at those companies. I just pluck them out of thin air. The point is, as soon as they know that you're interviewing at Meta and Google, every conversation with that recruiter will start with, how are things going with Meta? How are things going with Google? And at that point, unless you get offers from both companies, and unless you're a sociopath, which maybe some of you are, it's going to be really hard to sort of by omission make it clear that, like, not, tell them the truth that you didn't get the offer. And what you don't want to happen is a situation where they know that you don't have leverage. So you want to be in charge of the flow of information. If you get offers from those companies, great. You reveal it at the end when it benefits you and not before. So what do you say if they ask where you're interviewing? And I'll talk about compensation in a moment. You say, I'm currently speaking with a few other companies and am at various stages. Other companies, various stages, those are the magic words. I'll let you know, if I have an exploding offer and I won't accept other offers without talking to you. That last sentence, I promise not to accept other offers until I have a chance to discuss them with you, is magic. It's very disarming, and there's not much that they can say back. And finally, about compensation expectations. Why don't you want to tell a recruiter about compensation? Well, they always know much more than you do about compensation. And there are very few cases where you're going to be completely misaligned. If you're not sure if a company is going to pay what you expect, you can go on levels.fyi or some other site and just generally check the ballpark. And if they're in the ballpark, you don't need to have the comp discussion. One thing levels.fyi and other sites that have salary information are not very good at is actually telling you what that company pays. In my experience, those numbers are not very indicative. One mistake I've seen candidates make is go on levels, take the median salary and say, that is my expectation for that company. And then they've anchored themselves to something that is probably way too low. I've seen companies go out of band all the time. So recruiters always know more about what they're going to pay, and there's no value in you sharing a number. So if they ask you about it, just say, I don't feel equipped to throw out a number. I want to find out more about the opportunity, right? I'll be happy to iterate on the offer. And again, the magic sentence, I promise not to accept other offers until I have a chance to discuss them with you. I don't have very much time, so I think that's kind of the end. I hope I equipped you guys with some specific useful stuff you can take home. If I have time for questions, and if questions are technically feasible here, I will take as many as I can take. But Eugene, you let me know. Oh, I forgot one thing actually. I listed some free resources. If you guys want to read about salary negotiation in depth, or read a bunch of about a bunch of different companies' interview processes, or read 9 free chapters of Beyond Cracking the Coding Interview, look at those resources. They're all free, and I don't think you need to log in anywhere for any of those.
Progress.
How do you treat internal versus external recruiters differently? Like, what do you share with internal recruiters?
That is a fantastic question. So external recruiters work for some agency that farms people out to a bunch of companies. Internal recruiters work for one specific company. My advice is to actually not tell either of them anything. If you have to tell somebody something, I would trust internal recruiters more than external ones. Briefly, an external recruiter's job is to make a hire, right? And you might say, well, they're also incentivized to get me as much money as possible because they get a percentage of what I take home. But the reality is that chances are the person that you're working with is not taking the whole thing, right? The whole agency is maybe taking 20%, but they're an employee, right? So maybe they're getting a tiny little bonus. So a huge difference for you is probably a difference of a few $100s for them. And it is not worth it for them to rock the boat. They would much rather make a hire. And even more importantly, you're not their customer. Their customer is the company. So if you tell them something about where else you're interviewing, or how serious you are about a company, or your expectations, you should assume that anything you tell them, they're going to go back and share with the employer, because that gives the employer an edge in closing you. They might even say, hey, I know you normally pay people like 150 grand, but Jimmy would actually take this job for 130, right? Now the company is super grateful to them, saved them a bunch of money. They're going to keep coming back. They're building long-term relationships with these companies, and they want to make hires much more than they're working for you. So anything you tell them, just assume everyone's gonna find out.
Yeah, so good talk. I had a question. Say we're in a scenario where I'm not like looking for a job or anything, but one does come across my desk that I would be interested in. If they ask, what is my status on interviewing, should I be honest in saying like I'm not interviewing at all, or should I kind of give the same wording that you had?
Great question. So my advice is, one second, let me get there we go, is to always just use this copy. If you say that you're not interviewing, if I'm a smart recruiter, I'm going to say, let's get this guy through the process as fast as possible, right? And then let's give him an exploding offer. Because the last thing I'm going to want is to be like, how you're the girl that the guy dates and then he marries the next one, right? Like you don't want to be, as a company, you don't want to be that girl. So if they know you're not looking, they're going to act differently than if they know that you are looking. It is best to be very vague and always say few companies, various stages. Those are the magic words. That is, I think, the only thing you can say that actually reveals no information while making you look in demand, and has no downside. Everything else has downside that can be used against you. If you find yourself in that situation, by the way, and a company reaches out to you and you're like, oh, I wasn't even looking, make sure you postpone your interview and take time to prepare. Unless you don't care about that company and you're using them to warm up, in which case might not be necessary. Oh, I forgot to tell you guys one important thing. Um, I can't teach you negotiation in 10 minutes. Please read some of the negotiation content that's out there, whether it's ours or actually just read ours. Ours is really good. But failing a negotiation strategy, if you have to say one thing, chances are this will get you money, right? So let's say you get an offer, it doesn't have a signing bonus. Just say, can you please add a signing bonus? It would make my decision a lot easier, and you will probably end up with a signing bonus. This is probably the easiest $10,000 or more that you will make.
So I do have a question around programming. So you at interviewing.io, you run like mock interview sessions with pair programming assignments with different people. What languages are the most popular, and which one would you suggest?
Yes, the four most popular languages are, I'm trying to remember the order. Uh, in no particular order, the top three are Python, Java, and JavaScript. And then I want to say C++ might be a fourth. Um, I would say that Python is probably the best language for doing interviews in. Probably no surprise to this group, only because it abstracts away a lot of the sort of setup work that you have to do. It's very easy to use dictionaries. In a language like C++ or even in Java, there's a lot of like instantiation and other work that you have to do before you can start using a dictionary. One of the failure modes I've seen people have with Python is if it's the only language they know, because Python is so friendly, it kind of protects you from the guts and what's actually going on under the hood. So you may assume that things are constant time when they're actually linear time because like you're protected from having to think about that. So if you use Python, that's fantastic. It's a great language to interview in, but just like make sure that you know how things work under the hood a little bit so you can answer questions about Big O correctly.
So my question is, how can we keep up or stand out in a competitive job market, and how crucial is it important for universities to have a technical interview preparation course like CodePath does?
This job market is a little bit better than it was in, say, second half of 2022 and even in the first half of 2023. I think that was the worst market that I've seen since the 2000 dot-com bust. Um, and I was just entering university then, so I didn't pass through that one. But things are looking like they're getting better. Nevertheless, one of the unique things about the current job market is AI spam. So, despite the fact that things look like they're turning around, there are currently about 3 times fewer recruiters working than there were in the peak, like in 2021, when everything was just booming and going crazy. At the same time, there are about 3 times the number of job applicants for engineering positions. And on top of that, there are a bunch of spam applications. So I would say that today, recruiters are like 20 to 30x less efficient when processing applications than they were even a few years ago. So, what does that mean for you as a candidate? My best advice, and you can find more details both in the free chapters and on the blog about how to do this, is to bypass applying online entirely and to reach out directly, not to recruiters, but to hiring managers. In this talk, you might have noticed a common theme where I just talk shit about recruiters a lot. I feel like I acquired my prejudices the honest way because I've been one and I've been around them. Some are great, but for the most part, recruiters are not really incentivized to help you. They're looking for a very particular kind of profile. And if you don't match that profile, and you might not know what that profile is, they're not going to help. So I would make a target list of hiring managers at companies you're interested in and reach out to them over email, build rapport, and see if they can get you in. It's much harder. It's a slog. It's going to take months of work, but it's way more effective than applying online. Um, in terms of universities offering interview prep, if I understood your question correctly, what sucks is that it's not like uniformly distributed. I was fortunate enough to do my undergrad at MIT, and there we had but not only did we have a ton of algorithms classes, but we actually had a month-long session dedicated just to interview prep. Fortunately, the nice thing is that even if your university doesn't offer it, there are a lot of great free online resources that do. So I would not necessarily expect. I mean, on Interviewing IO, we have a fair amount of users who are college professors who have never worked in industry, and then they're dipping their toe and they're like, well, let me see, this pays better, let's try it out. And college professors who have never done an industry interview. So they're not really equipped to teach this stuff in a lot of cases. And there's such a big disconnect between industry and academia, unfortunately. So I would probably look elsewhere for interview prep materials.
Hi, I have a question. Are there specific red flags recruiters or hiring managers notice that maybe candidates overlook often?
Okay, so I'm going to try to answer your question, but I'm going to answer it with maybe an unsatisfying answer. The reality is that recruiters do not spend much time looking at resumes, and I would probably, as a candidate, not spend much time working on mine. At Interviewing IO, we did an experiment where we showed somewhere between 70 recruiters. I think we showed around 70 or 80 recruiters a bunch of resumes and asked them which candidates they would want to interview. They spent a median of 30 seconds looking at those resumes, which is clearly not enough to really read them. But the things they looked for by far and away were whether somebody had worked at a top tier company, to some extent, whether they had niche skills, and to some extent, whether the candidate came from a traditionally underrepresented group. The reality is that if you don't have top brands on your resume, chances are a recruiter is going to look at it very, very quickly and not really read it. So if you have top brands, I would make sure that that is very, very visible to somebody that is not reading, just like beat them over the head with it. If you have niche skills, beat them over the head with it. If you're from an underrepresented group, your choice whether you want to lean on that, but if you do, beat them over the head with it. If you do not have those things, I would not spend much time on your resume because chances are they're not looking. And instead, I would spend that time on doing outreach to hiring managers because if you're a non-traditional candidate, this is a terrible market. I've seen the one common mistake I've just seen is people like finessing the bullets on their resume and getting feedback and finessing them and getting feedback. And I think it's kind of a tempting thing to spend your time on because it's something you have control over. But the sad truth is that it really doesn't matter.
About your second point about not like trying to postpone when if you feel like you're not ready for an interview, I guess how do you determine if whether you're truly not ready or if it's just your self-doubt?
It's hard. This answer is going to sound a little bit self-serving, but I'm not going to try to shill you on my product. There are many ways to get mock interviews, including with friends, but I would probably try to mock interview with an experienced interviewer who is as closely aligned to the kind of role you're looking for as possible, and just see what they have to say. Um, it also varies quite a bit as a function of what kinds of companies you're applying to. A lot of my expertise comes from FANG and FANG adjacent companies, and there's some pretty specific benchmarks. Like if you're applying to Meta for their phone screen, I think you have to do 2 LeetCode mediums in like 30 minutes. So if you can do 2 LeetCode mediums in 30 minutes, chances are, and cherry pick a bunch of them, right? Chances are you're ready for Meta, but that does not hold for other companies, and some companies do not interview in that style at all. So what I would do is think about what kind of company you're targeting. If you're talking to a recruiter, don't be shy about asking exactly what the interview process entails. And I think people are often hesitant to ask recruiters things because it looks like they're digging or they're trying to game the system. You can ask. Like worst cases, they'll say, no, I can't share that. But you can say, hey, what kinds of questions are you going to ask? Are they going to be algorithmic questions? Are they going to be more practical? If they're algorithmic, are they like LeetCode mediums or do you ask LeetCode hards? You can like get really, really specific. And you can also ask your recruiter, what are some of the failure modes that you've seen most often, right? Why do candidates fail? That should already give you a lot of information about what to expect. And then once you know what to expect, see if you can find somebody that interviews in that style and ask if they can assess you and give you some honest feedback. One way to know if you're ready independently of that, I think no matter what style of interview you're doing, your interviewer will probably expect you to talk out loud as you're coding. So see if you're comfortable doing that, right? Can you do work, pick some problems and see if you can just work them without potentially running code, if you can just write out the answer, if you can explain what you're doing, if you have time to write test cases, even if you don't do a mock interview, or even if you use an AI interviewer, of which there are many out there right now, that's also a good thing you can do.
Thank you.
I just looked up most popular programming languages, at least on our platform, and Python is indeed the most popular, followed by Java, followed by JavaScript, and then after that, there's kind of a long tail that starts with C++. But Python is like 1.3x as popular as Java, which is the next most popular one.
Cool. We have some strong preferences between C++ and Rust, so it's a heated topic of conversation amongst us. Cool. So yeah, thank you so much, Aline. Appreciate all the time. Yeah.
My pleasure. I'll share the slides. Thank you everybody for your awesome questions. And good luck with all your interviews. And don't forget, don't tell recruiter stuff and don't be afraid to postpone. If that's all you get from today, I feel like I won. Bye everybody. Have fun.